backdated their clock yet. It is still 2:01 by them, but we're starting at 1:01 on the record, East Coast time. So, Mr. Pingree.
Yes, sir. Awesome. Commissioners, guests, welcome to the regularly scheduled strategic planning workshop. You may recall this was asked for, I believe, last fall. This is this year, and then once a year moving into future years, this will be your opportunity to do a 2-hour deep dive on the Office of Economic Vitality and all things economic vitality and development. Just a couple of housekeeping matters. One, I do have a note that the mayor, I think, is in a COVID-19 session, so I do note that he will be out. That might for the workshop, not for the regular meeting, but I think he wanted to be recognized. If anyone who does want to speak, even during the workshop, I do note on the agenda there are 2 places for citizens to be heard. So I have one speaker card when that time arises, but their blank cards are in the back. A couple of additional things. Let's see. When it comes to COVID-19, I do want, even though that's not the subject matter per se for this workshop, it's difficult on a day like this or a week like this to talk about the economy and economic vitality without noting that. I would like to note a couple of things. Number one, we will be giving a presentation during your regular meeting at 3 related to emergency function 18, which is business assistance. That's part of your emergency management plan, and how we as local government are working with the state, local agencies, and the business community to stay on top of this threat and protect our economy and those in our community. So that's one. The second thing that I wanted to mention is that clearly at a time when there's a disruption in the economy, not knowing how big it is, not knowing how small it is, I wanted to start by just noting that your next regular meeting in May will include a budget workshop. And at that point in time, we'll have more information, and we'll be bringing back an update in regards to issues such as how the sales tax is performing, how that may or may not align with the state projections, any impact to the current fiscal year, and any recommendation to curtail costs to meet revenues, and any impact to the long-term strategic plan as well. We'll also bring back an analysis on bonding capacity and bond rates and how that might be affected. That will all happen at your next regular meeting, and so I wanted to give you the comfort and confidence that that's being contemplated by your staff. The data reflected here today, and so now pivoting before I turn it over to Christina, our director, to go through a robust strategic plan. We have a lot, just as we prepare for challenges that will occur over time in the economy, we have a lot to celebrate and to report plainly on how we have performed over the last 4 years, how that has been aligned with the strategic plan that you approved for the economy and economic development, how that aligns with the work plan that goes to the strategic plan, and hopefully in major key areas where we are today in terms of the challenges that we're facing even without COVID-19, and where the opportunities are, and therefore how we might be able to move into the next 2 years to ensure that the success that we've been experiencing economically is expanded to every component of the community and continues as unabated as possible. And so with that as a preamble, I do have one speaker card before I turn over to, if you, that's the will?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Lenoris Barber? You'd like to speak at the section after? Okay. So, Christina, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Ben. Commissioners, as Ben mentioned, the objective of your workshop today is to provide a status report and update on OEV strategic planning, talk to you and receive guidance on developing a competitive project fund and future opportunity leveraging policies, and present membership modifications for the Economic Vitality Leadership Council. This slide right here highlights some of the impact that your Office of Economic Vitality has had over the last 4 years. We've worked with over 200 companies to assist with workforce and technical assistance. Under the direction of the board, we've incentivized 3 business expansions, which has led to the creation of 182 new jobs. That doesn't include the pending package that you considered at your last meeting. And we currently have 168 certified MWSBEs within your small business program. We're looking to have this number double as we go through the process of finalizing the MOU with the state's Office of Supplier Diversity. For an economic overview for our community, as you recall, commissioners, in 2014, right before the passage of the sales tax, our community did not have any targeted industries. We did not have a long-term strategic plan for economic development. There was no guaranteed funding for economic development activities. Our entrepreneurial ecosystem was just beginning and was a little fragmented, and conversations regarding innovation and growth occurred in silos. Over the last 6 years, we've seen significant improvement in these areas. Under your direction, we've passed the first ever long-term strategic plan, identified 4 focused targeted industries where we work on for business attraction and expansion. The voters passed by 65%, 12% of your penny infrastructure surtax dollars being dedicated to economic development. We have a vibrant and growing entrepreneurial ecosystem, and conversations are occurring between partners and between partners. Since your Office of Economic Vitality has been created in the last 4 years, we've seen private sector job growth by 6.6%. The unemployment rate is currently down at the last time we looked at these numbers in February. We've had over 150 startups and entrepreneurial ventures incubate at our hubs, and we have now the first public college of entrepreneurship here in our community through FSU. And in addition, our community is building its national and international image as a top 100 best places to live, the top 10 best cities in the South for the 2nd year in a row, the best place to get a fresh start, and we're in the top 25% for global innovation. Often when I give presentations, I say a lot that economic development, and in our case, vitality, really is a team sport. All these accomplishments that we'll talk about today are made possible by your leadership through the city and the county, as well as the partnership and collaboration from our chambers of commerces, higher education partners, workforce partners, entrepreneurs, and the 8,400 businesses in Tallahassee, Leon County. This slide here also highlights 3-year changes, which indicates that we have a healthy economy. The employment is growing at an average of 2.2% each year, which is outpacing the area's 10-year average of population growth. Our average yearly unemployment claims have decreased, and our office vacancy rate increased and industrial vacancy rates have decreases here. So we're seeing a lot of activity in here, and we're working a lot. We're going to talk a little bit specifically about site selection and activating that so we can best assist with those technical assistances that we provide as an office. You'll see your GDP changes here from 2014 to 2018. Our local economy is known historically for its government and university presence, but it contains a diverse and growing set, as I mentioned, of over 8,400 private sector businesses. The private sector accounts for 72% of our GDP and is growing at an average rate of 3% per year since 2016. This right here shows you our employment by sector and the growing occupations that we anticipate over till 2027. This information is captured from the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. And here you can see our exports by sector. Of note, the majority of our exports are going to the European Union, followed by Asia, South America, and Africa. And most of our exports are there within the machinery and manufacturing. Our cost of living is less than 3% of the national average here. This shows you a really nice indicator of how we compare to our comparable communities here. And now we'll move into our strategic planning from the past, present, and future. So first, defining economic development. When we developed the strategic plan, it was important to establish a common understanding of what economic development means for our community. By uniting the stakeholders under one common definition, we're able to marshal and strengthen the area's assets towards a single objective. In addition to those activities associated with traditional economic development, which is your attraction and expansion, this definition of economic development before you is broad enough to take into consideration opportunities for economic expansion by better leveraging cultural, natural, and arts assets to foster an ecosystem that initiates and nurtures new homegrown, innovative, and inclusive businesses. Here is our vision for the Office of Economic Vitality: to elevate Tallahassee-Leon County's profile, to promote and support our diverse and vibrant economy, and our mission statement to help guide the economic developers with efforts in coordination with the private and community stakeholders. This is our 6 key cornerstones, along with our 3 cross-cutting strategies and the targeted industries that we have passed, these 4. And Commissioners, as we continue to move forward under your policy guidance, we will adapt and add to the strategic plan and the work plan based on the direction that we receive from you. When you look at the work plan, there is 153 actions included in here, and 116 of those have been initiated or completed. A great example of that is establishing our magnetics task force. We did that 2 years ago and have continued to build on that. We created a marketing effort around that for Magnetic Capital of the World, and we're really seeing a lot of results in that area. Completed actions include our foundational documents that have since been complete, such as the strategic plan, the targeted industry study, and the disparity study. Right here, this shows you a little bit more, a different view of our initiatives. 27 of those have been completed, 41 are ongoing, and 22 of those are in progress. And some accomplishments that our office has received related to these include the data driver. We've released 9 of those to date. We highlight a partner on the back side of those. We send it out via our e-newsletter and on social media, and it's to help communicate our monthly status regarding job creation, small business loans, new utility starts, office and vacancy rates, and unemployment. We also do the quarterly economic dashboard. This is a very informative piece that gives you a snapshot each quarter on how our economy is performing. To date, we have developed 64 customized reports to our businesses, nonprofits, and other partner organizations, and conducted 11 economic impact analysis.
Well, hold there for just a second. Give Christina an opportunity to breathe. She's doing great. We're about halfway through what is an extensive report, but it's been extensive 4 years of work. Commissioners, just to synopsize on the business intelligence component, you may recall at the time of the creation of the office and your investment, and it was intentional, not just in the staff, but in the data platforms to be able to analyze all of this data. You invested in that, and because of that, whereas this community really didn't have historically a hub, an independent, honest broker for data, however it may be. Now it is well renowned through all that Christina just outlined, that you do have that capacity. But this is what I'm really more as excited. I'm excited about that, but I'm more excited about this. This is now a tool. We talk about, for example, the design work studio and planning, and how anybody, whether it's a couple or a business, can come in and find out everything that they can do on their property or a property that they want to buy. This is the equivalent of that in the business world. You can come into OEV, and at no additional cost, you can gain access to that huge data set that we have, and we can run specialized reports that solve your business needs and questions. And so I just wanted to pause here for a moment just to highlight that these kinds of reports and these impact analyses is something that hasn't existed in the market before. And I think it's brought a lot of value to those who have utilized it. we outreach constantly to get more utility of that. Back to you.
Commissioners, at our last meeting, we talked about our role in business development. That includes companies that are expanding locally or looking into our community. We provide technical assistance, ombudsman, and promote our local community and assets through marketing engagement. This kind of defines some of those accomplishments that we'll talk about here for our business development activities. This year alone, we've conducted 60 outreach activities. Our goal is to reach 120 by the end of this year, and that builds upon our business retention and expansion program. And we initiated our Small Business Saturday and Shop local promotion this past November. I talked briefly about the Magnetic Technologies Task Force. Our reputation is growing on a national and international stage, and this is made even more evident through the business activities related to our Magnetic Capital of the World campaign. Now, we're only a year into this, and this really is a marathon of a campaign for us. Companies are just beginning to see the opportunities for research and business development in Tallahassee and Leon County, and we anticipate that this area will continue to grow, and you'll see that in one of our key focus areas moving forward over the next 2 years. Our business impact, we're currently working 43 projects. Here you can kind of see what stages those are in. These projects include companies focused in magnetic technology, Fortune 500 enterprises, emerging tech sectors, and startups. And they've led to, hopefully will lead to business expansions, research agreement, and public-private partnerships. Our team is engaged in 42 different public engagements over the last quarter, and we are assisting with response and recovery, for which we won 2 awards for that. We'll talk a little bit more about that, like Ben mentioned, when we get into our business resiliency efforts as part of our main meeting later today. Our marketing and communications, I'm very proud to say that we have initiated a new marketing and communications teams. That's through the onboarding of Vision First advisors, as well as Zimmerman 2 to help with our marketing effort. And we recently hired a marketing person specifically for OEV, and that is with Kiana Brown. And she's doing a great job. So hopefully you're seeing OEV a little bit more publicly through our social media images. She developed our latest newsletter, so we're really excited to have her on the team and watching these statistics grow over the next year. For our MWSBE impacts, we currently have 168 certified. Last year, the City of Tallahassee had $7.5 million in MWSBE program expenditures, and the county had $4.4 million. Here you can see the impacts their individual outreaches have made. We've had 38 one-on-one certification assistances. We had 130 businesses participate in our B2B connections. 80 businesses attend our industry academies. This year alone, we've assisted 10 businesses and referred them to the FAMU Small Business Development Center for further assistance, and we hold monthly certification workshops at CareerSource. As we move into our next key focus areas over the next 2 years, your economic vitality team is focused in the areas of applied science, creative economy, technology, site selection, and MWSBE. Here within applied science and manufacturing, you'll notice that each one of these key focus areas is underlined by marketing and talent pipeline. That's really essential to each one, that workforce component. So each one of these key focus areas is going to look at how best to serve that talent pipeline. Within this area of advanced or applied science and manufacturing, one of our main objectives this year is to work with our regional partners and manufacturers, as well as Florida's MAKES, to establish a regional manufacturing association. One currently does not exist in our community, and this will allow us to have a business advisor within the Big Bend area to assist those growing manufacturers. It is certainly a need, and we're looking forward to that collaboration as we move towards that this year. The key performance indicators will, like I said, mention the number of talent pipeline opportunities and jobs co-created each year. In the creative economy, we know today that Our economy values knowledge workers, and the creative economy helps attract and retain people. So we're really seeking to activate this particular cornerstone of our strategic plan. Key performance indicators include, again, talent pipeline opportunities and jobs that are created here. And we're working with our partners to really focus on celebrating and advocating and developing this sector of our strategic plan. Our technology sector, this is a growing opportunity and growing business need, and we're really seeking to showcase that through technology, most specifically within GovTech and Polytech. We have a lot of companies here that have created as a result of solving a state government issue, so you'll see that as we really assist these companies moving forward. Site selection here. This key focus area really helps support our business formation, our tech transfer, our business retention and expansion opportunities, as well as recruitment. And we're going to work with our partners to develop a site where you can go and see what is available here. We're hoping that we can roll that out into this fall. So that's something that you'll be seeing too. We get probably about 3 requests a week regarding site selection and what areas businesses can explore into. And as you know, Commissioners, your MWSBE team is focused on activating those new and implementing those new policies that were recently consolidated under your direction. They are actively out there informing all our businesses on what that means for them, several opportunities for engagement, and restructuring the team to best implement those policies moving forward. Looking at the resources as we move forward, economic development is inherently a competitive and changing environment. We're right here in the middle of that when you look at the COVID-19. Communities across the nation seek to strengthen and sustain their local economies, and we've identified opportunities to enhance the competitiveness of our community while providing additional support and resources for local business and economic assets and community-wide initiatives. And therefore, we're recommending that you consider the creation of the Future Opportunity Leveraging Fund and the Competitive Project Fund as part of the budget development for FY21. This September, you asked us to look at developing a policy to govern that Future Opportunity Fund. This fund and this policy will provide you with the capacity to allocate funds to existing projects or new programs and projects outside of the budgetary process. And it provides a leveraging to enable you to approve funding for new projects when that opportunity arrives. Here is a snapshot of kind of what that general description is. Again, this is something that we will bring to you in May as part of the budget development process.
Just a quick additive here. So you may recall you approved this fund. This is for those things that are unanticipated that arise. You also set forth a motion to bring back a policy of, okay, what would that, how would that play out if you received a request? What would that be governed by, and what parameters would be on that? So it's the policy that'll be coming back before you. In addition to that, we saw an opportunity, which Christina will get to here momentarily, for the next fund to be created for a different set of opportunities that may arise.
Thank you, Ben. This is the second fund that Ben just mentioned, and it's the Competitive Project Fund. This fund enhances the incentives within the OEV toolkit and will be used specifically for competitive projects. As you recall, a competitive project involves either an expansion or relocation of the company, where a company has the option to locate their business in different states or municipalities. And the creation of this fund also fulfills one of the key goals within your strategic plan, where the funds would support land acquisition, infrastructure provision or upgrades, physical improvements to key sites, or workforce development and training funds. And it's exclusively focused on competitive projects. So therefore, Commissioners, we're recommending the development of this Competitive Project Fund to be brought back before you for your consideration in May. And next, during the next quarter here, over the next couple of months, we will begin a 2020 survey. The last time a survey was done was in 2016, and it's time to take another look to see where the community stands as far as our economic development efforts go. So we're seeking to reactivate and disseminate the survey to provide new feedback, which can be compared back to the original feedback to gauge community priorities. The survey will be designed and implemented over a 2-month period in mid-2020 to measure input and potentially informing program alignment and refining key performance areas and activities moving forward. And with that, Commissioners, we're recommending that you approve options 1 and 2 today. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your leadership.
All right, Commissioners. Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Great presentation, very informative. My question is on the formation of the new funds that we're looking at. I'm guessing these new funds will govern the economic development money that starts in 2020, correct?
That is correct,
All right.
yes.
We've already approved some projects, and we've already spent some of that money. So these funds would govern those that haven't been approved up until the point that we've made motions to move forward on it.
Yeah, that's correct. So just to put it in recent terms that might resonate, the Future Opportunity Leveraging Fund, that would be for unanticipated opportunities like Alabama Street. The other fund, the Competitive Project Fund, that would be for the $805,000 that was considered for Innovation Park as part of Project Juggernaut. Mm-hmm. And so that just to give you kind of the scale. Both were not known at the beginning of the fiscal year, and so there was money available. And what it would do is that would be the source for it, and it would detail how it would be vetted before it came before you.
I don't want to muddy the waters here, but I also don't want to miss opportunity. I have intentions to ask for a proposal for the FAMU proposal to be considered, and I don't want this, whatever happens here during this item, to prevent me from being able to ask for it later. So if it's in right fashion for me to ask for it now, I would rather do it now than us take these options 1 and 2 up, and then later on say, well, we need to have those funds fully vetted and put together before we can talk about funding any other projects, especially of the substantial amount with the substantial amount that the FAMU project is asking for. So I'm asking the question of, by passing these 2 motions here today, does it hinder me from being able to ask after FAMU speaks later for us to consider funding the economic development project that they're bringing forward from the $2020?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, yeah.
No, it does not hinder you. No, sir.
Okay, with that being in consideration, I'll wait to make my motion. Thank you.
Commissioners. Yes, Commissioner Bryant.
Let me do a follow-up question to that. This is our first year of the 20-year project, lifespan. So we had 2 projects that have been voted on and we've agreed to, the airport and the Civic Center. Convention Center, I'm sorry, thank you. So what was the total amount, or what is the total projected amount in the 20-year span? I think it may be 100,
Mr. Chairman, 120 million. Initially, back when it was voted on the referendum, we had projected at that point in time that there would be $90 million generated by the 12%. We updated that last summer for the first time to reflect increases in actual expenditures that we had seen. So it looks like the 12% would actually generate more like 125.
Oh, it's going
125.7. It's on page 105. There you are. Sorry.
So of the 125, our current commitments leaves what as a balance?
Well, we are, admittedly, we're getting a little bit into the item number 6 for your regular meeting. But at this point in time, oh, no, it's not that number. That number reflects if you were to up your commitment to the convention center to $40 million. Yeah, let me look at the old spreadsheet. I tell you, it's times like these, I either need new glasses or
Well, while
larger
you're
paper.
looking, let me just kind of give a point of reference. Whatever that amount is, as we look at the two funds, and it really goes to what was just said, we want to, well, I'll wait.
Yes, ma'am.
So what was the amount? You're there?
Go ahead, if you have it.
It is, your total commitment is $3.1 million for FY21.
Yeah, but you're talking
That's not
about the
cumulatively.
cumulative, yeah, the 20-year
Two big
figure.
projects.
Yeah.
59 million, I believe, is what was available unexpended going into the conversation of what we would do with
So out of
the convention center,
125, you've used half of it effectively.
effectively.
Okay, that's the question we're trying to get answered, right? So there's about 60, 65 still unspoken for. That answers that.
Yeah, it
I
does.
think I understood what you were trying to get to.
It
Yeah,
does.
you're backing out, if I may, just to clarify, you're backing out the convention center component.
The
and
20
saying, hey, before
million.
we spend the first dollar on the
Right,
convention center,
right.
what would we otherwise have? Whether it's 20 million or if it's 40 million and include the bond costs, that would be 59, just shy of $60 million.
Okay, so that does not include the increase of the 20 million, or it does?
But it does not.
Does
Doesn't
not.
include anything
Okay.
for that. Yes, ma'am.
All right, does that answer your question, Commissioner Bryant?
Yes, that's it for now.
Okay, I got Commissioner Lindley and then Commissioner Matlow.
Excuse me. Well, just a thought on that. Even though you've got 120 million and so forth right now, when we create things like a convention center, it's going to have a lot of synergy. It's going to keep building the sales tax revenue that comes into this community. Sort of the the goose that lays the golden egg, if it really does all of the things that it could do, which is all the businesses surrounding and all the revenues that come in. So this number is going to be ever moving, I would think, and hopefully it will be moving up over the years. So when we talk about this, I mean, yes, it's a number today, but it's by no means a number that we will be dealing with, that you'll all be dealing with in the next array of the next several years. And can I just ask one other question unrelated, which is on the site selection, which is great. We hear so much about all these empty buildings here and there. Do you do a lot with, I guess I would call it site recycling? Are you working on that kind of effort, or is it always a new site? Or
No, it's really
when you do inventory,
either
everything,
Chrissy and I can
the good, the bad,
answer
and the
this, but it's what is the available inventory, whether it's an older building or whether it's a brand new building, whether it's raw land that has not been prepared, whether it's land that has been cleared and plumbed and
Right.
mind there's different categories. And what happens usually is a site selector or a business leader will come to us and we'll say, okay, and they'll give you some information so that we can provide them with some value. I'm looking for a building of 20,000 square feet, and it's got to be zoned this way, and it's got to have this X, Y, and Z factors, number of doors, proximity. And so we'll then run that against everything that exists in the marketplace and present back to them a comprehensive, report that they can act from.
But so how do you get the inventory? I mean, does Drew go out scurrying around the community and say, empty building, or I hope not, or is it all through the tax office, or what? How do you do that? Or do people just voluntarily say, hey, we have a piece of real estate, it's empty, we want to put it on your list? Or what?
It's both. We have access to an inventory of databases, both available through the Tallahassee Board of Realtors. They have a commercial site that we look at. We also utilize a CoStar, and we utilize our connections and relationships within that specific industry with our commercial brokers, as well as sometimes if we know a business is specifically interested in an area of town, we'll take a look and drive around and see what it is and make some phone calls.
Yeah, CoStar being one of those pieces of software that you invested in when you set up the office. So we have that capability.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Matlow.
Yeah, thank you. With the competitive project fund, so we would have the policy for that at the May meeting, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We'd bring back both. Well, you've already approved the Future Opportunity Leveraging Fund, so that would just be the policy. And then we would bring you both the fund overview for approval as well as the policy for what would govern it.
Okay, and will we be funding that fund in the next fiscal year?
Upon approval by the IA board, yes, sir.
Okay.
And funds and et cetera.
And then my other question would be, how will those, fundamentally, how will those operate differently? I know when we talked about the leveraging fund, it would require board direction for projects to move forward. Do you know where the staff cap or spending limitation would be before board direction would come in?
Well, the spending limitation for the staff cap, if you will, would just follow the blueprint purchasing policies. If the amount was over a certain threshold, it would go to the IMC. If it's above another threshold, it would come to you. But the policies would outline specifically, as Christina had said, what type of an opportunity it was, right? So the competitive projects fund would only be for competitive projects,
Okay.
Recruitment, retention, expansion, things of that nature. But there's other opportunities that arise that are not competitive. They're based here in Tallahassee, if you will, and they're not looking to move anywhere else, but they still warrant potentially a review by the IA board and serve an economic purpose. That's why I use the Alabama Street as an example. It's not the only example, to say the least, but that's an example of why that would go to that fund versus something else going elsewhere.
Okay, and then my next question along those lines, if we adopt these key focus areas, applied science, creative economy, technology, site selection, and NWSBE, where does that put our limitations on what staff would be able to do on things like Alabama Street or things that specifically help locally owned businesses and really target into anything outside of those key areas?
Commissioner, we take our policy direction from you on the Alabama Street, and those projects are certainly important to the overall economic vitality. These are just key. The creative economy is just an example of something that we haven't activated within your strategic plan and that we're going to continue to focus on. These are just kind of when we look at our staff as a whole, those are going to be their main focus areas, followed, of course, by any direction that you give us as a policy.
Just to add on to that, it does not prohibit the ability to adhere to all the other components of your strategic plan.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then just finally, I guess, along with Commissioner Maddox's point, I think there's a big decision coming up in a couple hours based on the convention center and the FAMU proposal that we received.
I'm sorry, I'm talking behind you.
I'm hesitant because that's going to be essentially 50, 60% of our overall budget over 20 years. And I think before those major decisions are made, it's hard to really see what we have left, where we're going, where we want to direct funds into, all of these different funds. So I'd be hesitant to really direct what we do with what money's left before we know how much we're going to spend for that major decision. Thank you.
Okay. I was going to say, that discussion we'll have probably pretty robust in a little while. It's Commissioner Williams-Cox, but I've got a real quick question, Christina. On the public-private GDP number that you had early on,
Yes.
can we get a trend line for that?
Absolutely.
Is there a way to get running 5 years or whatever it's been?
We can, but I will tell you what you will see reflected there is that the quick bullet is your GDP is growing, and it is absolutely being driven by the private sector.
Right.
Because what you'll actually see there is a flattening, if not a slight moderation
Of the
to
government
the public.
side. Yeah.
But you see the growth, as Christina outlined, year over year, particularly in the last 3 years.
That's what I thought. But
Yes.
it would
We can
help
get the trend
bolster
line.
the argument that I hear all the time about, we don't do anything in the private sector. We're so government reliant, which we are to some degree, but that certainly helps. So if you don't mind, I'd love that.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Williams-Cox?
I wanted to say, just in plain English, these the adoption of these two items will provide us with the greatest flexibility for to be able to support our local businesses and others who may come, but primarily our local businesses, whether they be the shoe shine man or the juggernaut. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, ma'am,
Okay.
and all in between.
Okay. That's what I want to make sure that our audience hears that. I want to make sure those who are watching this understand that that's what we're trying to do, because sometimes, we get caught in our jargon and we just need to make it plain That's what we're trying to do, provide for that. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, commissioners. Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to say up front here that this is a great report. I think we've accomplished, and you laid this out with target industries and other things like that. We've accomplished more in the last 3 years, honing in on our economic development strategy opportunities than we've ever seen in this community. And this may have been mentioned later, but congratulations to both Ben and Christina for becoming certified economic developers. This was no easy task. I know you've been working very hard. And that is an incredible benchmark for our organization. Having certified DEDs, right, is really something that we needed in our organization, and your efforts are going to help us take the next step. So thank you for that. To me, the discussion today, of course, it overlaps with what we're going to talk about later. The Convention Center, FAMU have already been mentioned, but I am still I have the same question that I've had for a while. We talked about it last summer, which is how do we hone in on what this particular fund, one of many ways that we support our community, city, county, we have a lot of different budgets, a lot of different funds that we can put towards different efforts. How do we hone in on what makes the biggest impact for our community within the economic development space? And there are incredible needs. Not all of them can be accomplished or addressed through any given fund. I'll just say tourism dollars can't help us build houses necessarily, but it can support a lot of revenue, sales tax revenue, for the community that helps us fund other infrastructure projects. So these things are all interrelated. But I think we're at that point in this board where we're either going to look at the blueprint, the OEV funding, the 12%, which, as we've all mentioned, will likely keep going up. We got conservative estimates in the out years, but we could certainly see a slide in the next couple of years. So we're going to have to be, cautious of that. Are we going to look at this fund as a source to address immediate problems year in, year out, project proposals that come to us, opportunities, and/or, it can be a really honed and strategic approach to meeting the needs of our community? So I'm just going to lift up one. These growing occupations, the chart that you had, when I look at this list, a majority of them, I'm not sure those give us a living wage. If you have 2 nurses in one household, it might not be as comfortable a living wage and affording different housing options and others as an accountant or someone else. Janitors and housekeepers and others on this list, critical resource. I don't think they're they're paid as well as they should. But in looking at this list, what my takeaway is, can that give us a strategy to help focus our job creation and recruitment on areas that provide jobs with a higher wage for people who don't have a 4-year degree or people who do? The reason why I highlight that example is that I think there is a way, this is strategic planning discussion, to use the amazing efforts and everything we've learned in the last few years, all the data we've brought in, to hone in on some of these strategies going forward. If we do that, I think the return on that investment can help us fund a lot of other things in the community and help support our community. But if we don't do that, I really see us moving towards a time where we're just receiving requests from the community. We like one, we debate it, we fund it. We don't like one, we don't fund it. And we're kind of making incremental progress, but I'm not sure we're having the impact that we really hope to achieve in the next few years and what our mission really is driving us towards. So, Mr. Chair, I wanted to state that quickly because this strategic planning meeting, I think we can't help but mention the big projects, and they would absolutely have an impact on our strategies in the future. But I really think there's another question about how we're going to approach this fund. The second, thing that I just wanted to highlight here is I've been reflecting on our county commission, our board retreat. We went out and toured a number of cities. We got a KCCI grant just to focus on the libraries. It's not because the libraries aren't exceptional, they are, but it's because we want to keep pushing that envelope forward and be the best library system we can possibly be and responsive to the community. Our staff has certainly done this with economic development. They've looked at best practices, other strategies. We as a board have never dug into that. We as a community have never done what we just did for libraries on economic development. So if that were something that helped us kind of hone our policies, our projects, the choices we make, to see what that ROI is to get as many good jobs as possible, which will support other goals and efforts. We've got funding for a full deep dive on the strategic plan in 22, and we may want to advance that. We may want to bring that forward so that we can really hone in on some of those policies. So that's just two general things, Mr. Chair. Drilling down to where some of the comments were before, and I will save, I want to hear more about FAMU. We've got a lot of information on Convention Center. But if we were to move forward with one or both of those projects today, our ability, and I think some of the others have mentioned this, to respond to other needs, to create more jobs, to really lift the whole economy, I believe could be challenge. It could be a real challenge. This is the one fund we have for the next 20 years to do job programs and things like that. So I guess my voice today is really caution, that I think these are exceptional projects to reflect on. We take a deep dive, but I am really nervous about making those choices, making concrete choices today without a wider reflection on what our goals are and what those strategies are and honing in on that. Thank you.
Good. All right. Just a quick comment, Commissioner Dozier, your best practices comment about, getting in front of that. I mean, it's always been my feeling that government doesn't do as good a job as they could in sharing best practices. Economic development is generally, for every elected official in local government across the country, their number one. If you ask any local government, city, county, school, almost exclusively always go, that's their number one thing. It's the one area that you might find a little bit of competitiveness where they're going to say, well, I'm not going to tell you how I'm doing it. So as we go out there, I'm just saying, people are less anxious to share in a competitive environment in that than they are in government in general. Just good, but we can do it. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And the name of the organization, International Economic Development Council? Yes. There are a lot of parent organizations and others that show best practices. So I know we haven't gotten to the EVLC item yet, but just reading through the minutes of our business, what our business partners and others on the EVLC shared, there were some really interesting comments about being more nimble. Yeah. I think our staff is thinking about that, but we haven't really had that conversation in a policy direction. As Christina and Ben have said, they take direction from this board. So they've got this approach to be as nimble as possible. Have we given them the best tools, the best structure, the best ability to exercise the good information that they have learned from these other organizations and their partners who may be willing to share more because it's not in a public space? That's really what I'm talking about. There was another comment in the minutes about permitting process and land use. We're all hearing this. We discussed this in briefing, and I would love to see a list of why not Tallahassee? Why didn't you choose Tallahassee? Was it because you couldn't find industrial space? Well, to me, that leads us to think about shovel-ready sites first and foremost, if that is the big thing that prevents people from coming here. That's what I'm talking about, Mr. Chair, is not going to Greenville and saying, give us your trade secrets. But there is a tremendous amount of information out there, and we are getting it from our business community. but it's not coming into our discussion at this table. And I think all of us would appreciate, we've all said it, we want as much feedback as possible. So I think at this table, looking at those strategies could really help us make some decisions.
Yeah, good point. All right, commissioners, I would entertain a motion to accept this.
Motion for option 1 and 2.
We have a motion for option 1 and 2. We have a second. Any other discussion? Commissioner Matlow?
Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind to just indulge me with a friendly amendment, have locally owned businesses specifically under the key areas.
Excuse me, say that again.
Just to add locally owned businesses specifically under key areas, under option 1, support for key focus areas.
I would have no objection to that.
No objection whatsoever.
Yeah.
Enhance it, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion on the floor with an amendment. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Good deal. Nice job.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next, I'll do a check-in with Mr. Barber. Still waiting until the next part? Okay, all right, good. All right. Then the next item is item number 2, consideration of modifications to the EVLC. I think Christina may have a very brief presentation.
Commissioners, as you recall, when the Economic Vitality Leadership Council was first appointed, we had yet to complete our targeted industry study. This is currently the makeup of your board. We're recommending, based on the targeted industry studies, that we add in those representation to your leadership council, as well as the chairman of the Minority Women in Small Business program here. This enhances your private sector representation on your leadership council. With that, commissioners, we are recommending that you approve option 1, which will bring back those new appointments to you at the May 21st meeting.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to say my comment about the EVLC notes for this item. I've already shared those. I am really glad we're expanding this board. Christina, remind us, right now we have disbanded the larger group that we had contemplated in the first couple of years or worked with in the first couple of years, and we have the task force on magnetics.
Correct.
And then there are several roundtables, but magnetics is the only other formal committee that we have at this point. Is that right?
Yes, we've convened a group focused on GovTech, and we're moving towards the RMA, the Regional Manufacturing Association.
Thank you. We talked, this might have been a year and a half ago, about other target industry or targeted groups, maybe one focused on workforce or other things like that. Is that still contemplated, and recognizing there's a lot of staff time, the more committees you have and others? Do you think that information will be filled out by these new members of the EVLC or a work group on workforce training and others? Is that still kind of contemplated as we move forward?
Commissioner, we sit on several different workforce board through CareerSource Florida, where we serve on their board of directors, as well as the Career Pathways program, and we certainly participate with the chambers in their conversations of workforce, as well as attend the Aspire conversations. So there's several different workforce conversations out there that we are very involved in.
Thank you. I anticipated that was going to be your answer, and actually this is one of those areas that we don't need to duplicate the efforts of others. And I love the fact that you're participating in so many of our strategic partners, boards, and other things like that. So thank you for filling that out. Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion for option 1, but I'm going to add to that. At our regular blueprint meetings, we see a report from the CAC chair. In my memory, this was the first time I read the minutes of the EVLC, and I think the value that that board brings, and particularly with new members, is exceptional. Most economic development groups have a strong partnership, as we do, with strategic partners or business community in our community. So in addition to option 1, I would like to include in that motion to have the minutes from the EVLC meeting included in our agenda and a report from the chair, as we do with CAC. I think that kind of balances out the OEV side. So
I'd
that's my motion.
I think that's fair. Absolutely good. And any discussion? Oh, I've got Commissioner Richardson. I've got Commissioner Williams-Cox, and then Commissioner Minor. Commissioner Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know that and we could probably sit here and add hundreds of other positions and industries, local industries, to this list. But the one that comes to mind that I don't see represented here, and I know the effort was to look at our targeted industries, is the not-for-profit sector. We just got those that are running for election or re-election were provided with a questionnaire from the private sector. And one of the things that or the nonprofit sector, I'm sorry, one of the things they highlighted in there was the economic impact that those organizations have, but yet they are not represented here. And so my question is there an opportunity, where is there an opportunity to add a representative from the not-for-profit sector, or can we add a representative from that sector on this EVLC?
Go ahead.
To be done specifically, I'm sure in some of the categories you probably could cross-collaborate and someone from the nonprofit sector could be appointed. Or you could just add a designated seat. The concern, of course, for these is that they get too large.
Yeah.
But I know the IA board is aware of that. So,
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
If I could on point here.
Yeah.
Commissioner Richardson, I think that's an exceptional suggestion. This came up at our Village Square discussion on Monday. I wonder if there might be an association, or more specifically, the Institute for Nonprofit Excellence, if they could participate as kind of an industry voice for nonprofits. It is a huge part of our economy. You're absolutely right. The associations and the nonprofits contribute a great deal. I think maybe some of the hesitation, we might not need an agency lead or someone like that, but someone who really aggregates those numbers. And it seems like any might be the appropriate group to
That's actually
look
what
to.
I had in
Is that what you
mind.
look?
Yeah.
If the second is willing to entertain this, I would add that to the motion.
Let me make sure I understand. Well, you want to add in, as Commissioner Richardson was saying, add in a member for nonprofit.
A representative
Yes.
from the Institute for Nonprofit Excellence who could talk. They are aggregating those numbers for the economic impact of nonprofits. So it's not an agency level. It's someone who's looking at the bigger picture.
But it's an additional person on the.
It would be. It would be one more person.
I'm a little. Let me just say my immediate gut, and your first statement, Commissioner Richardson, was it's a slippery slope, and there's a lot of people. And
I
so
realize
because
that.
we did this once before when we first started, if you remember, when we went down this path and the group got to 30 or whatever it did, and then finally we said it's unmanageable.
Well,
so.
Mr. Chair, that was, forgive me, that was the EVCC. That was the community council and everything like that. For this targeted group, I'm with you, and I think, Commissioner Richardson, you said this as well. We don't want to create a slippery slope, but if we are looking at the critical sectors of our economy, that is one of those sectors. So if not in this motion, Commissioner Richardson, I would support having an agenda item come back to look at that, and we can always add it later if you want to make a second motion if the chair's.
I'm not comfortable with that. Let me tell you, I'm sorry to curtail the conversation. If we said we would love to have you there, these are generally public meetings. It's not on a roll call type of thing where you have votes that are that tight. And reach out to the nonprofit groups and say, please, we want your participation. And then 6 months or a year, if we get into this, we can say they definitely need to be part of this, and we can do it. I worry that we start adding too many members of this.
Well, I guess the question I would ask, Mr. Chairman, is are there other members of this board that anticipate adding additional members,
right,
other than this one? And I don't see that. So I'm really almost insistent on it because
that's fine. I'm not fine with my second, but I got a couple other people stacked up to speak, so let's get.
Mr. Chair, if you want to withdraw your second, I'll add that to my motion. And Commissioner Richardson?
I would second.
So we have another second. Yeah, I figured that would happen. That's fine. I've got Commissioner Williams-Cox, Commissioner Minor, and then Commissioner Matlow.
Okay, I wanted to say, looking at the list of who's already there and the vacancies, I hope that we will look at diversity and inclusion when selecting individuals to serve in this capacity, because this being Women's History Month, I'm looking at this list, and the women are few on this list, and I'd hope that we would.
That's few.
We
Out
would.
of 4?
We would do, okay, I'm looking at the agenda item, I'm sorry, so I only see 2, so maybe there's others, but I just want us to, as we're looking at these, and I know they'll come back to us, but please bring back to us a diverse group to select from, of all, not just gender, but other things as well, other categories as well, because we want this to be a well-rounded, we want it to look like our community.
Yeah.
And our business community. And I, too, agree with the addition of the other person because for this simple reason, when I count 12. On boards, you need an odd number, so, in case there's a tie. So, Mr. Chair, I understand what you're saying, but I think one more, a baker's dozen won't kill us. Okay.
I'll go along with it at the end.
Okay.
So I've got Commissioner Minor and then Commissioner Maddox.
You can take me out, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In looking at the makeup of the current EVLC, it's very impressive. We've got some really outstanding community leaders serving on this committee. But when I was during the briefing with Ben, I noticed that some of these people are rolling off in about a year, and some of them, I don't want to name any names, but there's some key people on this committee that really are right in the midst of determining a lot of our success with Magnetic Task Force, for example, and some other things. One thing, and I don't know how strongly I feel about this, but I wanted to see what the mood of the board here is actually having an amendment to the motion that would basically extend the 2-term consecutive limit to 3 terms.
Mr. Chair,
We have an amendment to an amendment.
Commissioner Minor, I truly appreciate, this is always a tough one, right? Because we have incredible volunteers and people participating in the groups. And yet, years ago at the County Commission, we spent a lot of time making sure there was opportunity for new voices to come into the mix. And this is actually something we talked about in briefing, and I wanted to affirm that there were term limits because as valuable as the voices are in this group, there are so many people who have valuable voices, and I would anticipate anyone who is rolling off might stay involved, to be sure, and with gratitude for service. So for me, for the motion, I'm not interested at this point. We can always waive a policy if there's one individual in the future, but you do point out one person who might expire next year, but he's being reclassified into a targeted industry seat, right? So that I don't know if that changes his specific term, if that's the person you're thinking of. But the Magnetic Task Force is still an opportunity to have that engagement. So I think we have other opportunities, and I'm comfortable with the 2-term limit. And I saw some other people nodding.
It seems like the mood of the board is basically consistent with yours. So, and I just want to kind of throw that out there. It's a balance. It's a big balance, right, between making sure we have new voices coming in, which is very valuable, which is the whole need for term limits to begin with, but also retaining some of the really good work that some members of the current EVLC are doing. So I want to kind of throw that out there and see what people thought. I'm okay with not proposing an amendment to that motion.
Okay, Commissioner Maddox.
On point to what you're saying, though, I do think there has to be some respect for institutional knowledge. So all the people who are on the board currently don't roll off? I mean, did they all start together?
It's staggered.
It's staggered.
It's
Okay, I just
staggered
wanna make sure.
to ensure continuity.
Page 39.
Yeah. Okay, as long as they're staggered, I'm fine. Okay.
Yes.
All right, Commissioner Maddox, you didn't want to speak in it? Okay.
I'm good.
That's Commissioner Matlow, I'm sorry.
We've gone so many conversations. I was
Yeah,
going
I
to throw my
apologize,
support for nonprofits. I don't see it. I see a lot of overlap in other industries, but don't see where they fit in. And I think they're critical to the economy here.
So okay. All right, so we have a motion on the floor with an amendment.
Please.
The motion, as I understand it, is to accept the proposal with an amendment that adds the one, Commissioner Richardson, that adds the one nonprofit exec.
And yes, so it's option 1, adding the Institute for Nonprofit Excellence to the EVLC, including the minutes from that committee
Right.
in our agenda and
Yeah.
a report from the EVLC chair to be positioned, I suppose, with the CAC board chair report, or report at our regular meetings.
Very well.
Clarification?
Yes.
It would be the draft minutes. They wouldn't have been approved
Sure.
at that time, if that's okay.
Thank you, Ben. Good clarification, because of the timing of our meetings, they're reviewing our agenda. So draft minutes would, and actually, Mr. Chair, I really appreciate that clarification, because I think it is informative to hear from the CAC and the EVLC what their thoughts are on the current agenda. So yes, I'm not talking about 2 months later necessarily, but the draft minutes, so that we see their perspective on our agenda items.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a second. An amendment as it's been followed on. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition?
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
sir.
for the workshop, you only have 2 speaker cards left
Okay.
before a modest break. First is, Mr. Lenoris Barber.
Mr. Barber, name and address for the record.
No. Speak into the microphone. It's being recorded.
Thank you, sir. I guess I run the risk of coming here and sounding like a broken record, but I had envisioned that we were going to see some type of revision to the Economic Development Strategic Plan, because that's the way the workshop was built. But there weren't any changes discussed. And as you know, I come here every time we have a workshop on economic development or anything on economic development, talk about economic inclusion, economic segregation. And I think we really need to have a focus on that. And I know Alabama Street was mentioned, and some type of contingency fund was also mentioned. So that means that anytime anything from an economically distressed community comes about, it has to go through some type of contingency process rather than being built into the plan. And I think we should plan for uplifting our economically distressed communities. If you think about it, there's a cycle: poverty, criminality, and incarceration. And that's what drives whether some folks who want to come to Tallahassee, although I've seen the business intelligence, it very seldom highlights our crime rate, but folks are aware. The MWSBE program, I think it has no teeth, and we really need a monitor, a dedicated monitor to help sort of, I guess enforce is a strong word, but right now I'm not coming up with anything better, to make sure that we are actively working toward meeting some of those goals that we have in the disparity plan. And the reason why I'm so concerned about having some revisions to the Economic Development Strategic Plan is that right now we seem to just be counting things. We count how many people we spoke to, how many meetings we went to, how many conferences we went to, but we don't count any effectiveness measures, or we don't count the results, and I think that's critical. There should be more, well, going back to when we initially did the survey for the Economic Development Plan, there was significant interest through that survey on local business formation. And we seem to be more focused on business development or bringing folks in from the outside rather than developing local businesses. And on our business intelligence, again, we focus on the broader economy, but I really would like to see a focus on some of the not economically distressed communities like Bond and Frenchtown. Do we know what the GDP is for Frenchtown? Do we know what the unemployment rate is for Frenchtown? So if we do, I'd like to see some of those things highlighted. And for the for the council, the EVLC.
That's time, Mr. Barber.
Okay. It seems like we just have the same people all the time on all these committees, and I'd like to see more diversity on those. And can we get a status update on the revolving loan fund that we approved back, 6 months ago?
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have another?
Next
speaker?
Next and last speaker is Mr. Stanley Sims.
Why you gonna leave when I speak? I asked him to come out and talk about. Oh, well, you better move when the mayor says. Go on then. The mayor's a bad dude. My name's Stanley Sims. I'm at 1320 Avondale Way. And it's so unfortunate I don't have the chairman here to hear my remarks. But I want to say this. I want to ask you for your own before you ate it all.
I got another one.
Okay, good.
All right.
I really wish I can speak and express myself as eloquent as you do. Because you take a stance and you don't come across aggressively. I don't major that. I ain't mastered that yet. And Commissioner Richardson, thank you so much for acknowledging the value that our nonprofits do for this community. I got to go fast. Now, Bloomberg is no longer, and this is why I wanted you to stay, sir. Bloomberg is no longer in the race for the presidency. But one thing he said that put a stamp on my heart is that he realized, this billionaire realized that if he was black, he would not have attained the wealth that he attained as quickly as he attained. I said, well, darn, he must have known. He must have was calling my name. And so my point is this. Kona ain't coming. It's already here. So now if Kona going to affect the feasibility and the economics of the north side and make their life miserable, what about the 32304 who already miserable before the Kona came? Y'all act like y'all ain't getting it. Here's what I'm saying.
I'm trying to figure out who Kona is.
That disease.
Councilor
Coronavirus.
In the country, we call it Kona. And so what we
Go
did,
around the corner.
what we did, yeah, go around the corner and catch Kona. And so what I'm saying is, while you're planning these big things,
Give him 2 more seconds.
think about our 32304 area when you want to grow businesses. Now, I want to give a shout out to EOV. They tagged me, Richard, to help me get through this process. Because this process, in order to dwell down into the weeds, Commissioner Richardson, some of us got to be led by the hand because we've been bamboozled so many times. They come and they tell us things, but then when we look up, we see trucks coming from out of state. We see subcontractors coming from out of that big old nice thing they built over there, the TMH. The construction, contractors, most 70% of them were out of town construction people. That's deplorable. That's unacceptable.
Mr. Sims, your time is up, sir.
But y'all took 2 minutes. No, I mean about 10 seconds. Can I say my last little
Take
thought?
your 10 seconds, sir.
I love you so much. Go Rickers. My last little thing I want to say is, please think about that Providence Zone 32304 of how we can do to help. We know around the whole state. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I left 3 seconds on.
Thank you.
Madam Vice Chair.
Yes, Commissioner
If I may.
Dozier.
Thank you. I know that we probably will welcome a break before our next meeting. So I don't want to belabor this point, but I do want to recognize good friends don't always agree, Ms. Barber. We don't always agree on things, but I think you hit on something that I was trying to articulate earlier. The purpose for a strategic planning workshop, I had hoped that we could dig a little bit into our goals and how we're going to hone in on that. When we get into meetings like our regular meeting, we're focused on issues. And that's the right time to do that. Different projects, different issues. And I, again, don't want to press too hard, but I have the sense that we are okay with the way things are going and just responding to projects as they come forward. And this is something that's underlining our next decisions, our huge decisions today and moving forward on whether or not we're going to lock away a majority of our OEP funds in the first year of the sales tax for the next 20 years. So one of the things that I think came out of some of the other questions here, and so not to belabor this point later when we get into those subjects, is our overhead and our staffing and our programs. If we choose to move forward on one or both of these large projects, these large asks, we may be forced to refine our staffing levels, refine our programs, and how we are able to respond to workforce training, how we are able to work with our community and attend these other boards and things like that. I think that is something that we're really going to dig deep on. So I wanted to offer that right now. If we had a few minutes and anyone had thoughts right now, if you didn't want to belabor it later, I would love to hear it. If not, just making the statement that should we move forward, I hope in the budget discussion later this spring that we do a deep dive on those programs and staffing issues and others, because our ability to be responsive in future years is going to be dramatically reduced. So thank you, Madam. Yeah.
Mr. and Ms. Chair, I'd like to respond to that. I hear what you're saying, and I heard what was said. I just want to take it up 30,000 feet, because what happens, much of this happened before I became a part of this board, but projects were laid out, huge projects that was going to take globs of money from all over this town that did not include everybody and did not include projects everywhere. Now we have an opportunity to go back and look at this thing and include some people, some major players in our community who got left behind. For nobody's fault in particular. I don't think we all knew exactly where we were going to be going or how much money could be involved or any of that. So I don't want us to forget that we're here, we started somewhere, and we're here, and we left some folks behind. And so now here's an opportunity to bring some other people into the mix with good projects that are going to help our community with talent retention and with economic development and with a lot of things. And it's also how, a lot of things. It's going to help our residents see themselves in these bottom line figures that we're going to be looking at in budgets. Because right now, a lot of them can't see themselves in what we're doing, in these projects that we're doing, because they're not happening at their doorstep like it is for other doorsteps. And I say that because when the city had our retreat in January, a lot of development was occurring in one area of town. But there was an area of town that has availability for development, but it was not being included. And I asked the reason. I didn't like the answer. So we have an opportunity in all of these places, Blueprint, CRA, other places, to make all parts of town desirable places to work, live, and play, and for people to come. So as we look at these projects, I think we need to look at who got what, who didn't get what, and let's help those who didn't get. Because the answer to solving poverty in Tallahassee, Florida, 32304 and everybody, because you can't track poverty by zip code. The key to it, what we need to fix it, is right here in our own county, in our own city. We have just got to be willing to make those bold decisions to make this happen and leave a legacy for our children and not a harness for someone to have to come along after we're gone to try to fix it. We have the haves and we have the have-nots. And every chance the haves have an opportunity to help the have-nots come up, we should do that. And this is one resource where that is available. And I know that there's a scientific approach to doing all of this, but people who are struggling don't care about the science. They're trying to get their next meal. And right now we're out there trying to figure out what's going on with Corona, as Stanley Sims says, Kona. We're trying to figure that out. So we got decisions we need to make right now that are going to be far-reaching into the future, just as we've done in the past with some of the CRA projects that have occurred that had nothing to do with helping people get to where they need to get to. It was helping others get what they wanted. So that's my little rant, that we need to take the blindfolds off and see the whole city and help bring up the other Tallahassee so that we have one Tallahassee.
All right, Commissioner Maddox.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Good remarks, Commissioner Williams-Cox. I do have a respect for what Commissioner Dozier is saying in that we very well could approve two very large projects, two very large sums of money that will come out of our economic development pot. And if we do that, I think she's right, and we have to be right on the numbers when it comes to the staffing piece that we are obligated to, as well as the other things that we are obligated to that have already been committed to. And so I'm hoping that as a result of today, whatever comes out of today, that what she's asking for in a workshop or some kind of budget discussion on if we allocate this much money to two projects, what is it going to mean for us staffing wise, and how do we make sure that we have the cushion, that we're building in the cushion that don't leave us in a place where in the out years we aren't struggling to pay our staff and we're not struggling to still have an OEV office. I know you guys have contemplated in the cost of staff, but have you contemplated in the cost of staff or a contingency there, a contingency fund of if we're in lean years and we're not able to generate as much as we like to, that could put us in a pretty tough place. And so I'm gonna tell you right now that I'm in a position, I'm fully ready to place my support behind both projects, but at the same time, I do also want to have the discussion about, okay, now what does that look like? How do we look at the rest of our budget to make sure that we are going to be sustainable long term with the OEV office that we built? So I do have respect for what you're asking for, and I think it's important as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I've got Commissioner Matlow, then Dozier.
I just wanted to, when we set up this meeting, we talked about kind of expressing our priorities of where OEV should head and what projects were important to different people. A couple things were mentioned, specifically economically distressed neighborhoods and revolving loan funds for local and small businesses. I know a lot of times when we have these conversations, they don't really have a category that they fit into. And I think part of Commissioner Dozier's point is, do we want to be picking things one at a time as they come, or as we go into the budgeting thing, should we say economically distressed neighborhoods are important to us and make sure there's a classification and amount for each of those things, so they're not coming to us, on the fly and saying, where do I fit in, how do I fit in, but just explicitly saying we do value these things, we want them, and we want to provide funding for them. And as we go into budgeting for the next year, I'll be firmly in support of this.
Thank you. Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those of us who were at the Village Square on Monday, we also had a robust conversation about ethics, and Sunshine came up. So one of our challenges with Sunshine, we all respect it, is that this is our only opportunity to talk through these issues. So Commissioner Williams-Cox, you and I can appear at times on different sides of issues, wildly different, but it has always been my gut feeling that we actually agree. Most of us agree, and everything you said is actually right in the pocket of what my concerns are. I could not agree more. I was profoundly disappointed with the Imagine Tallahassee process and really struggled, and we didn't adopt any but two of those projects, the airport and convention. And we're going to get into this later, but one of the thoughts I was going to share later was the convention center, this $20 million, it was plucked out of thin air from my understanding. It was not construction related. There was no plan. It was, we could contribute to this type of project as a game changer for our community. So I think you're absolutely right that it wasn't inclusive. Those projects came from the members of the Imagine Tallahassee board, and we haven't gone back and looked at all of them, but they'll come to us at different times. And you also said, people need to go about their daily lives. They elect us to sit at this table and really dig into these issues. So how do we marry what people are struggling with a strategy to help them? And it may not always seem like we're responding to one particular issue in the moment, but we've got a bigger picture that we're looking at. It's a really hard thing for each and every one of us, for our staff, for everyone. And we struggle with articulating that through our infrastructure side and everything. So I could not agree with the discussion more, and I appreciate the comments, kind of spending a couple minutes on this piece, because this is our opportunity for us to hear from each other. And trust me, I don't want to keep asking these questions if I am the only one of 12 who wants to look at things a little different. But my gut feeling was we really are more in the same place. The last thing, Mr. Chair, is that the neighborhood, Commissioner Matlow, you talk about the economically distressed neighborhoods and others. I think this is the key point where one of the justifications for aligning our Office of Economic Vitality, our EDO, our Economic Development Organization, which every county's got to have, with blueprint planning, was because there was alignment with the infrastructure. We know the infrastructure projects help improve our economy and absolutely impact neighborhoods. That's what we're seeing in the Southwest right now, or the planning stage. We're about to see more investment there than we've seen in a very long time, probably my lifetime. So I think maybe there is a way that we can look at the infrastructure projects, look at some of other city-county funding, CRA, things like that, and see how we can leverage off each other. If CRA is doing a great project in one area, is there an economic development piece or an infrastructure piece that works together with that? These are the types of things that I think we could dig into and talk about, and that's why I wanted to bring this back up at this point, because our business meetings are always really heavy. Today happens to be an odd one with one item. But again, I appreciate the comments, and I think we do need to dig into this and get more of a strategy. Thank you.
Commissioner Bryant, and then Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really, I was going to speak earlier, but I got in line because Commissioner Dozier is on point when you start to talk about strategic planning. It is not really a presentation, but it should be a dialogue. So you really do have to look at goals, understand where we are, and who's being held accountable for accomplishing. Now, we have two major items. I'll wait to get into those when we get into that meeting and not take them out of order. But as I was reflecting upon the mission and vision that's stated in this document, it is inclusive of Tallahassee. That means the entire Tallahassee. And we have had projects, and I've posed this question to several people, that basically says that we're going to, and I'm 100% in favor of economic development in this community, but it has to be economic development for the entire community. That is not an easy task, but we have to be deliberate, I believe, in moving from these are our goals, this is how we're going to actually increase our economic base, but how does that leverage itself into communities that currently are really create the separation of two Tallahassees? And I think we have to start to think strategically about how to make that happen. But I'll talk more about that when we get to the next meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm the only one at this table today who served on both the Sales Tax Committee and Imagine Tallahassee. That was a 2-year process. I spent a lot of time, and others did, away from our families. We gave a lot to this community. There was a tremendous effort to make both of those groups representative of the community. We met. I don't know how many meetings we might have had, but we certainly tried to include everyone in that process. I don't know what more we could have done to have been more inclusive in terms of who was involved and the input that we took to come up with the recommendations that we did. I guess where I'm having a problem, and Commissioner Dozier, I believe I agree with you. No, I not believe, I do agree with you in what you're proposing, because I'm having a problem now with these two tremendously huge financial commitments that we're about to make. And I can't say that that was what I envisioned as a member of either of those committees, but particularly Imagine Tallahassee, that we were going to spend 60% of those economic development dollars on 2 projects and hope that they would benefit everyone in the community. Hope that they would benefit everyone in the community. I really believe that we thought that those dollars would be targeted to address the issue of economic segregation in the community. I can't tell you that a civic center is going to address that. I couldn't tell you that the FAMU project is going to address that, and it'll be right around the corner from where I live. I can literally walk there in a matter of minutes if that's what we decide to do. But it's not what I had in mind. I had in mind the targeted industries that we would bring to this community. I had in mind the locally owned businesses that wanted to grow that we would invest in, that we would invest in entrepreneurial efforts like Domi Station, that's how those dollars would be spent to improve the economy and opportunities in this community, not on these 2 projects that now one of them is going to be almost 3 times as much as what was asked for at the time. And so I'm struggling. I'm really struggling with my support for either of those projects because it's not what I envisioned. I can't speak for the others that were on Imagine Tallahassee, but I don't remember that conversation that we said, we're going to invest 60% of this money in 2 huge projects and hope that it would change the economic face of our community. I don't remember that kind of conversation. And so, like I said, I'm struggling with both projects at this point because it just doesn't reflect what I think we were trying to achieve at the time. And so, Commissioner Dozier, from that perspective, I do agree with that we need a plan. We need to address those areas of our community where we say we need to make them a part of Tallahassee. And I can tell you, there are people who think that we haven't done anything in the community, but my whole goal, because I had been on the original Blueprint Committee and I saw where the money was spent, so when I came to the Sales Tax Committee, I was hell-bent on making sure that this entire community benefited from those sales tax dollars over the next 20 years. And I can assure you that the south side of town and Frenchtown will benefit from where those dollars are spent because that's where we approve those projects. So for those who think we didn't have representation and that there weren't, those of us who were fighting to make Tallahassee the all-America city for everybody in our community, we did do that through both of these processes. And so, again, I'm just struggling with these 2 issues that are coming before us this afternoon from that perspective. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Richardson. Commissioner Proctor.
Mr. Chairman, I jumped in late here. I typically don't think of Commissioner Richardson first thing in the morning. He just don't come to my mind.
I hope not.
You don't, brother. But this morning...
You have something you'd like to tell us?
Yes. This morning, Commissioner Richardson came to my mind, and has been on my mind all morning because I know that in this community, and certainly at this table, no one is more seasoned in dealing from the intricate details of the penny, establishing the projects, all the details. No one has his experience. And I was wondering this morning exactly how and what his thoughts were in terms of the projects which hit the list and never materialized, and how we now find ourselves inundated with the bigs coming to the table preemptively, leaving projects stranded. So
one of those projects such as the fairground, which when we line projects up, we project and sell them to the community. The community thinks they're going to get something. And after the vote is taken, then we create a tier process, level 1, 2, 3, and so forth. And once our staff goes in the back room in the dark and a new lineup emerges, the same names that we took that had no ranking in front of the public. But after the vote is taken, there are some who ain't going to get fed. So, Commissioner Richardson, I just didn't know the long view that you have on this and how hard you have actually been on the grind to make projects happen. And I'm very disappointed to say that, it's sort of a bullying process. It's a bait and switch process that we line up and show the community. We try to show all geographic regions. It's just that after the vote is taken, the money never comes down that way. And I feel comfortable in what I'm saying because each of you can pull up those lists from the last 2 pennies, and then you can see what projects actually got going. We got a couple of projects that I'm impressed with. One of those, really am, got a project today. That stuff been, I'm just going to say the fairground because that's just where my heart has been. Just can't get going. We can't get a rendering. We can't get the bigs to write a sheet of paper. What do you think? Just can't get going. Nothing. We still got bathrooms that are outdoors, literally. We just can't move that project. It has dirt and all of that, which would be a very competitive site for a conference center. But no conversation, just tune out. So I couldn't be more frustrated than you, Commissioner Richardson, because I ain't put in what you done put in. But I am empathetic in listening to your voice today with respect to the equity issue, how long people have been waiting, the residual. We've just absconded and just left them. And if that's what we want to be about, and what we're really saying is that if the right people come to this table and impress us, if they're the right bigs, then we just cave in and ignore the people who have voted for us and depend on us to represent them at this table. So I've probably seen about $4 or $5 billion worth of work over my 23, 24 years at this table. I probably spent about that much money. But out of that $4 or $5 billion that I've seen spent at this table, I'm so sure is lopsided with respect to all of the community being beneficiaries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. I think that's discussion-wise. We don't have anything actionable on this, right?
No, sir. This is just open discussion. You do have,
we have one speaker card?
One more speaker card from a citizen. If,
why don't we get that?
Mr. Jim Bellamy.
And while Mr. Bellamy's coming up, let me just make an announcement. There's going to be a press conference at 4 relative to the COVID-19 or the coronavirus. So I'm going to push the start of blueprint for the workshop back to 4:15 because I don't want to get into the regular meeting from 3 o'clock back to 4:15 because if we get it halfway, 2/3 the way into it, and a number of us have to get up and leave, the whole discussion goes sideways. So
understood, sir.
Yeah.
I'll save my question for after Mr. Bellamy,
sure.
but I have a question on that.
Sure. Mr. Bellamy, name and address for the record, please.
Jim Bellamy. My address is 524 Martin Luther King Boulevard, zip code 32301. You know, I had no intention of saying anything today. As a matter of fact, I just came really to listen. But you got so close to what impacts upon my kind of program till I got to say something. We started a commercial kitchen about 5 years ago, and I appreciate all the help that we have gotten from whomever we've gotten it from. However, it's been a very difficult road because it was difficult to find resources to be able to address that. Now, what we've done, we have a program. I mean, I say a program. We have a business, okay? And we're a nonprofit. This business has the potential of being a multi-million-dollar business. Now, some folks can say I'm dreaming, but I can see where we're going. We could do that. But see, we have not been given the kind of support that would enable us to do that very quickly. We've gotten support and we appreciate it. But we need things like marketing. We need support in terms of buying stuff from us. Right now, we do catering. We're going to cater an event tonight for one of our neighborhood programs. But we do catering. We have a child care license. We have a license where we do FSU's daycare and all that kind of stuff. But I'm saying that we have the potential to create jobs. We've had to hire people since we started. We got jobs there. We make a tremendous contribution, which people really don't pay any attention to. Look, you know, it's like they think that we don't make a contribution, but we do make a contribution. Oftentimes without people even knowing that we make a contribution. And it's there. And if you support more organizations like our organization, we can get a lot more done. I lived in D.C. for 27 years, and I worked with the neighborhood. As a matter of fact, I ran a neighborhood program. And I saw where nonprofits did building of buildings and houses and all kinds of businesses in the community. It doesn't seem like the confidence is in that kind of population here in Tallahassee. That's what I see. And I'm just being honest, and I think maybe this is my time to come out and say what I need to come out and say. But we need to do better. I read a statement one day, and the statement said that if one of us is not doing well, all of us are not doing well. And that's where we are now. We need to give more support to your neighborhood groups and your neighborhood organizations. There's a lot of resources out there. We could be building houses, but nobody thinks that we can. I'm through. I shut up.
Thank you, Mr. Bellamy. Thank you for your time.
But I thought it was just time I said this. I mean, you know, because I've been sitting here for a long time, and a lot of you know me, and we done had these kind of conversations. But we really need to put more into it and be able to do it. As a matter of fact, I've been asking about this, whatever. Yeah. I don't know about 20 years then, but I've been asking for it for a while. But I think it's something that we really have an opportunity here in Tallahassee. Tallahassee is a hospitality town. Let's get ready for it, because we're not ready for it now.
Thank you, Mr. Bellamy. Appreciate it. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I might say one more thing, because I know Commissioner Dozier has had a lot of mic time in here before I got here this morning. So, and she's trying to ease up on the microphone again. So I got one more point in here before she just hog it all.
Really?
Somebody pull up the minutes and see I'm right.
Let's start the 3 minutes here.
Commissioners, I just want to say that also as I reflect upon the last 2 pennies, I would really want to know to what extent could we honestly hold our heads high to be proud of the inclusion of minority businesses having a part of those dollars or our insisting. And I think that a failure of the penny has been that although 35% of Leon County is black, and probably 90-some% of those are, like most of us here, Democrats, they don't get nothing for that vote in terms of the dollar circulating back through the business community and so forth. And I think that we have to be more conscious of our efforts of this penny to service all of the vendors here. And I have been thoroughly disappointed that we've talked the talk. When you analyze the data, the actual use of minority businesses has not occurred. A few years ago, the city had brought workers in from, I believe, Orlando, and these were Hispanic workers that were working and putting rocks in cages behind Bethel AME Church. And, there are people who qualified, able, ready, citizens of this community, but the contract was to put rocks in a cage and put them in a ditch, did not go to local workers and people. And I think that we have to be steadfast, and I'm calling on this commission to be abounding in the thought and prosecuting a dollar that is going to somehow this time, our third time up at bat, this is certainly my third penny, that the minority business community would be included, and that we have some bases to know, and that we care enough to follow through on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Dozier, you wanted to weigh in?
Mr. Chair, I was simply going to ask a question about the procedure for our meeting and moving our meeting. So you said, because you tossed that out pretty quick, you said the press conference is at 4 o'clock.
Downstairs.
We have a publicly noticed meeting at 3 o'clock.
It's not a public hearing, is it? It's a board
No, but it's a publicly noticed meeting. Mr. Chair, if there needs to be prep time before the public or the press conference or anything like that, I respect that. But we do have a lot on the agenda, and I think pushing this until after the press conference could push us much later in the evening. We may have people in the room who want to speak. So I would love it if we could get at least started for half an hour, 40 minutes on the subject, and people expect us to start at 3.
Yeah, our clock up there is not right. We're working on it, so just let everybody know it's not right.
Yeah, that's
right. We're going to. It's 2:47. We're supposed to start our blueprint meeting at 3 p.m.
Let me ask Council. It's a publicly noticed meeting. What are the requirements as far as moving it?
We could start at 3.
Right.
Go through consent, which I think will be fairly quick.
Okay.
Then we can take a recess and pick up, because the folks that will show up at 3 will get notice that you are
all right, so
it until 4:15.
How about this? Go ahead.
They'll get notice when they get here, but those who are coming because they're expecting to be here and to do what they need to do at 3 may have to leave. Is my concern. I do know there are people who are planning to come.
Here's what I'd like to do. I hear it. Start at 3. At 3:45, we make a hard stop. We stop the discussion wherever we are, and we come back at 4:15. How's that? Okay? And I think that accomplishes what Commissioner Dozier's looking for.
Mr. Chair, I think that will work. But if we have speakers, I think we should take those speakers if they're ready to go, so that we don't have them waiting. I don't know how long the press conference is going to last.
We'll take speakers generally before we do the discussion, so depending on how that plays out.
But what is the press conference about?
4 o'clock, the COVID.
Who's talking and
where is it?
City, county, it's downstairs.
I don't think I'm attending, so if we still have a quorum, I think we'd still be able to proceed.
I'm exercising chair's prerogative on this one. So 3:45, we take a hard stop. 4:15, we come back.
Mr. Chair, make one last comment, please.
Yeah.
I understand that you're going to exercise chair prerogative, but I don't really understand what's so important that we can't keep the business going that we have to do.
I think we're about to
if
make
it's more of a consideration of us being able to be at the press conference, could we not get a report about what happened at the press conference while we're doing? I
haven't seen a statement. I don't just walk up to a press conference not knowing what it is.
Who's in the press conference?
I don't mind having a press
City, the
conference.
county, and the schools, and probably most of the business community.
How come I haven't seen the statement?
Because it's just being put together.
I don't want to walk to a press conference that I have not
So
seen.
I'm going to just say 3:45, hard stop, 4:15, we start back. Okay, we get through consent. We can hopefully get through most of the speakers. It's a half-hour break. I don't think it's, and we would welcome all of the elected officials at the press conference. So it's just downstairs.
Mr. Chairman, I want to just say respectfully, sir, we deserve to see what it is.
I have not seen it, Commissioner Proctor, so I can't show it to you yet.
Mr. Chair, is
Got
it,
there on something that we don't know.
I'm guessing it's fair to say that things are moving very quickly.
Yes, that's-
And it may have impact on us. We may
Yes,
need to know
and we
that.
may-
I understand that, but
Yeah.
if there is any information that our staff can provide in the next hour,
Yes. I
let's
think
let's leave it there.
Everybody's staff
We
should be
deserve
getting
a
something.
briefing or something.
So we got a 10-minute break, and then we start at 3. We're going to go to 3:45. I'm saying that loudly so everybody will hear that. And then we'll continue
You good with
after the
that?
press
Yeah.
conference.
Yeah.
That
That
should
gets
not
us-
take
I think
more than
that
about
starts us.
15 minutes.
Workshop is adjourned, sir.
Yes, workshop's adjourned. Thank you. Sorry to be.